was tune is dedicated to, guess, what you would say was one of the strongest influences in jazz to all instrumentalists. Charlie Parker was a saxophone player, but his influence was with every instrumentalist that plays this thing we call jazz was influenced by him, and that was a tune called Your Majesty was dedicated to Charlie Parker. It's really a takeoff on a tune called Thou Swell, but it was pretty well disguised, I hope.
some of those early influences from your father, the story about him buying you a piano.
Oh yeah, when I first came to D.C., my parents moved here when I was 10 years old. And approximately a little over 2, maybe 3 years later, I was 13, and my father and my uncle, who worked in a used furniture place down on 7th Street, brought his, he was a truck driver, you know, he brought this piano to the house one evening about 6 o'clock. And my uncle, I had 2 sisters and 2 brothers, it was 5 of us. And he said, first one of you kids learn to play something on this piano, I'm going to give him $5, you know. But in lieu of the fact that my father was making $35 every 2 weeks, $5 was pretty good money, you know. So, my own mercenary me, I sat down to the piano as soon as they sat it down, and which I guess probably close to an hour later, and I picked out a tune on it. And there's a tune called Lift Every Voice and Sing that we used to do in church and in school. And I picked it out with 2 fingers, so you know, so and so forth. And I picked it out before I went to bed, you know, that night. And while I had found myself a new toy. And it's been my toy ever since.
Was music a very important thing in the house? Was there a phonograph besides the piano?
Yeah, we had one of those phonographs that you wind, you know, with the dog and the big horn on it. Yeah, sat up on a table and you wind it up. And we had records of Bessie Smith, Louis Armstrong, and one Duke Ellington record that I remember, a thing called Ring Them Bells, it was called. And there were Mamie Smith, and there were others, but those were basically the ones I remember.
Just a little bit closer, please. Sure. Okay. Now, you went to Armstrong High School.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me, that was a trade school.
Yeah.
Tell me what you were studying at Armstrong and what was going on.
Well, you know, people used to always ask kids, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up, you know. I had a brother that he would say, I want to be a carpenter, I want to be a so-and-so and so on. But of course they'd ask me first, and I would say, well, I don't know, you know. So my brother, he'd always have a ready answer for him. Most times a different answer every time, but they would tell me, they would say, now see, you should be like him, you know. My brother was younger than that. So, you know, he knows, there's a boy that knows where he's going, you know. So after a while, I started telling people anything that came up. And when I went to school, I had this idea in mind that I needed to study some kind of trade or something. In the meantime, when I went to high school, I was already playing the piano. So when I first went to high school, I took electricity, which turned out to be a disaster because I didn't have my mind on that or mathematics at all. And the second year, I took bricklaying, which fortunately, the teacher who had been there for a while, and he knew Billy Eckstine, who also went to Armstrong. And I think he was a classmate of Duke Ellington's when Duke Ellington was at Armstrong. So he saw what I was doing, and he says, look, you're never going to be a bricklayer. He said, why don't you just, when you come in the morning, mix the mortar for the other kids. And he gave me an envelope and said, take this envelope up to First and Florida Avenue and give it to the barber in the 3rd chair. But that was my task every morning. After that, I was through, you know. I'd go in, mix my order, and take my envelope and go up there. I later found out it was his numbers he was I was putting in for him every day. But that was the extent of my activity at Armstrong High School. You know, I never played music in school at all. I was never in the high school band, or it just never occurred to me to be in the band.
Now, when did you got your first? It was your first job at the Jungle Inn. And tell me about some of your first piano jobs around the city as a musician.
Well, I guess what you would call my first actual things that I got paid for was about I got my piano. There was a kid in school, we were both in junior high school, who played guitar. And he used to tell me how we could make money playing these things they call house hops. They actually house rent parties where people sold bootleg liquor and, you know, all kinds of what they call soul food now. And these were actually, were annually Friday and Saturday night functions. And he told me, he said, you play good, so the two of us can make money. So we'd go play these situations on Fridays and Saturdays. We get anywhere from 50 to 75 cents each. You know, the lady would give us $1, maybe $1.50. And after doing so many of those, and all the time, every day I was at the instrument, you know, and I kept learning more. In the meantime, my father started me taking lessons from a neighborhood teacher. A fellow's name is Boyd. In fact, he's still around, lives in Gaithersburg now. And I think this year it'll be his 85th birthday. Anyway, I began to learn a little more about music, and he would occasionally send me on a job to play for him, which he knew my repertoire, and he would tell me, said, you go at 9 o'clock, you go and play, and I'll be there in an hour, you know. And I learned later that he would take another job. And, but in doing this, I was playing with the older fellas, and they would help me along, so I began to learn what it was like. We played a club, they were playing a club down on E Street between 10th and 11th. It was upstairs, a dine and dance place, you know. Anyway, from that I got to know different musicians, and one day this fellow came up in the neighborhood, and I was asking about this kid that played piano. You know, somebody told me, you know, he lives right there, and he came in and he asked me, you know, said, would you like to play a job? Well, yeah, if we thought I was good enough. He said, oh yeah, you're good enough. So this was a job at a place called the Atlantic Beer Garden. It's on 14th Street between T and U. And it was, then it was owned by a fellow named Satterwhite. Anyway, this drummer and I played that job for, I guess, at least about 6 months, 8 months. And that was when I really began to meet a lot of musicians, you know. This guy's name, everybody called him Gilpooby. Now, just why, I don't know. I never did know whether that was his real name or not. But I learned that the reason I got the job was because the fellow that had been playing there was unreliable. You know, he'd gotten drunk or something. So anyway, I stayed there until I think probably school started or something. I remember, went back to school for a couple of months or so. The next thing I knew, I was out playing again, you know. And I got my second job was a place called Happy Joe's, Irish club down on H Street, right across the street from where the convention center is now. And I played there with quartet, I guess probably 6 or 8 months there. And in the meanwhile, there was the Republic Gardens on U Street, and there was a club called the Jungle Inn, where this a lady named Miss Lyle's on this club. And I had been doing some playing up there on occasions, but then this fellow came in town who I understand was been an old boyfriend of hers or something. And she had been recently widowed. So he came in town and took over the management of the club. And I learned later his name is Jelly Roll Morton, Ferdinand Jelly Roll Morton. And I went up and I had heard vaguely about him, but Dixieland music and that kind of stuff was the farthest thing from my mind. You know. Anyway, I used to go by there and sit in and maybe play one or two pieces. And he finally asked me if I'd like to be his assistant or to play the intermissions. Jelly Roll would have 2 or 3 shows a night, and between these shows, I would play the piano, and Pearl Bailey would dance and sing up there. Occasionally when I see her, she kids me about it. I think we were making $14 a week, I believe it was, $14 or $15 a week. Worked 7 nights a week. And,
tell me the importance of working with Jelly, or studying, being an apprentice to Jelly Roll Morton, and that kind of music.
Well, I wasn't playing anything like Jelly Roll Morton. You know, as a matter of fact, I didn't even like what he was playing. You know, I was young, I was a teenager then, and I was listening to people like Earl Hines, Fats Waller, Earl Hines, Teddy Wilson was really my idol. He'd just come on the scene. You know, he was like brand new, and Billy Taylor was around here then. You know, the pianist Billy Taylor. We both went to the same elementary school. Anyway, we used to hang out together a lot, and he and we used to idolize Teddy Wilson and Art Tatum. So Jelly Roll Morton was old hat, you know. Of course, I didn't dare ever say that to him out of respect to him as an elder and his musicianship, you know. But there are a lot of guys that used to go up and, you know, and he's a guy that liked to brag about himself all the time, you know. I did this and I did that. And the other guys would call him old fool, you know. And he used to tell them, say, oh, so you're all crazy. Say, there's a kid, this boy here is going to be something, you know. Because he'd sit up and talk stuff to me for hours, and I'd listen, you know. So a lot of it went in out the other, but, you know, that was the way you're raised to respect your elders. So. Anyway, I learned a lot that benefited me in later years because of times when in my career, when occasions would come up where someone would ask for something of a Dixieland nature or a ragtime nature, you know. And I was, in a way, I remember it now, the thing that he used to play is called, I don't even know what it was called. But I haven't played that for years. It's just the idea, the tune, you know. I could play it better then than I do now. But he had a whole repertoire of things. He's a very good pianist. He is one of his favorites, I guess what you call one of his big things was he used to play Tiger Rag, a tune called Tiger Rag. And when he played it, he would make the tiger roar, you know, with his arm, and people used to love to hear him do that.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the personal signature of the Harlem Globetrotters for Sweet Georgia Brown. Tap dancers are free to part. They have taught drummers to beat. And then the drummers wanted to learn to dance. They're the only musicians who constantly walk on their hips. Our man of the past learned his rhythms from the great Bunny Briggs. Ladies and gentlemen, we give you Brother Black stepping out to Count Basie's Cue.
I ask you just to play a little bit. Just make sure your audio level here.
that time, I'm talking roughly about 1930, part of 37 and 38. At that particular time, and I organized a little band that had, one of the people in there was a guy named Frank West, who played with the Basie band for quite a while. Anyway, we had this band, it was a high school band, all high school kids, and we would go to the Howard Theater every week and be inspired by the bands that came there. Duke Ellington, Chick Webb, Fletcher Henderson, Don Redmond, Teddy Hill, Cab Calloway, all the big bands. And we knew all the stars in the band, and whenever they opened, we would go backstage and see them come in, unload their things, and we'd be up there with the opportunity we would get. All of these guys, I was the only one that was playing what you call professional. And although I was very young, I was about 16 then, 16, 17. I used to go to a club that a guy named Freddie Woods owned, and it was an after-hour place. And just had a piano up there, and they sold whiskey and gambled, and all of the musicians that came in town used to hang out up there. That was where I met Lester Young and Ben Webster, Willie Smith. All of the guys used to come up there, and I would sit back and listen. I remember one morning the session had stopped, I guess, about 6 o'clock, and everybody went home, and Lester still wanted to play. And he and I, just the piano and Lester, I guess we must have played until about 10 o'clock that day, and he taught me a tune that he just recorded with Billie Holiday. And I think it was, if I remember, there's a thing called You Showed Me the Way, I believe it was called. Or it was either that or These Foolish Things, I don't remember. But it was that kind of thing that was where I was in, really in apprentice years of learning to play from the way the big boys did it, And then we would go back and with the band, the little band, and we try to imitate everything that we heard. And at 7th and T, there were about 3 clubs around there. There's one club called the Old Road Social Club, and but most of the instrumental, the big clubs were on U Street. I remember one time they had 5 clubs on 1200 block of U Street, and all of them were doing good businesses. And there was one in the 1300 block, and then they had clubs around the corner on 14th Street. So in the course of time, I played just about all of those clubs. The most sophisticated one was a place called the Crystal Caverns. And it was, they used to call it a supper club, It actually was a very, very nice place, and that everybody, it was a little bit more expensive, and stayed open till 4 o'clock in the morning. How they did it, I don't know. But, and then there was a place called Dyke's Stockade out northeast that I played, and I had a band out there. And I guess I must have played out there for maybe 2 or 3 months. And then I got a call from this fellow that at this Crystal Caverns, asking me if I'd like to come up there, In other words, he was stealing the other Mr. Dyke's band. Anyway, I wound up with a band up there, and that was when a saxophone player named Charlie Rouse, it was his first job. He was 18 years old, and I had a bass player to play with Charlie Parker's band for well known, his name is Tommy Potter. The other guy's name is O.C. Johnson, who's Used to work for a long time, worked the Arthur Godfrey show. But I kept that band out in the Crystal Caverns for, I guess, close to 2 years. And then there was a guy that played with Jimmy Luncet's band, which is another band that I forgot to mention about the High Theater, because he was one of the favorite bands, and was definitely my favorite. He had a trombone player named Trommy Young, just passed away last year. But Trommy had left the Luncet band and came to Washington and asked me if I would like to join his band, that he was going to have a six-piece band. And he was inspired by Louis Jordan, who was making a lot of money then. So he had this gig in Chicago that we was going to. So I, excuse me, I'd never done any real traveling then. So I, and being with a guy like Trommy Young, who was very well known on account of the records he'd made with Jimmy Luncet. And so I decided that I would go with him, because at that particular time I'd just begun to write music,
I'm gonna jump here for a second and ask you. You told me when you were playing like with the Eckstine band,
Mm-hmm.
in bebop.
Yeah.
You said some of the white folks would say, "Jazz it up, come on, jazz it up."
Yeah.
We didn't call it that. We were just playing.
Right.
Was there a certain special language that you had with music? What were you trying to do as musicians during that time?
Well, the fact is that nobody gave a thought to what you were trying to do. The only thing you were trying to do was play music, play the instrument, and play it the way that as best you could, As far as labels are concerned, it's kind of hard to think in this day and age when everything's got a label that it wasn't like that then. But as far as I know, the music had no such names as labels of any kind. We knew what it sounded like, and we played popular tunes, blueses, and etc. But there was never a time that I remember ever seeing the word jazz on any club in Washington, D.C. that I played. That's something that came up in the 40s when, during the war, and when I played 52nd Street later. And that was, it was called kind of a jazz alley. Like, I understand that in New Orleans, that was where everybody talked about jazz. We always thought it was funny, anytime I heard somebody say anything about jazz, so we'd turn around and give them a second look, And of course, when we played the white clubs, there always some guy would come in after and say, "All right, boy, come on, jazz it up." And we'd laugh at him, so let's play some of this food, But jazz, that particular word wasn't used, and not because you didn't want to use it, just never. It was supposed to be some kind of old-time thing. The only time I remember hearing the word jazz was, I guess, when I was about 3 years old. For Christmas, I got a toy, which was a little log cabin with a guy on top of it, had on one of those checkered suits with a big check in it and kind of hat and great big red lips and black face, and you wind it up. And he used to dance on top of the log cabin, and the toy was called Jazz Boat Dancing on the Roof. And that was the only time I heard anything about jazz, So it had nothing to do with the music that I learned to play around here.
There was a quote by, I think it was attributed to Miles Davis. He said, every time the white folks caught on to the language we were playing, whether it be bebop or whatever, we changed the language. Our music was our language for the blacks in the music. Tell me.
Well, Miles Miles came from another part of the country, which was very much music orientated, which was St. Louis, you know, because he's from East St. Louis. But as to what was going on in St. Louis and New Orleans, places like that was supposed to be meccas for music, you know, I didn't know about then. Of course, Washington, D.C., the only claim that we had to music was, you know, Duke Ellington and a few other people that had gone to New York. But as far as the Washington scene was concerned, there were a lot of people playing music, but we had no labels or anything like that, you know. As a matter of fact, the ultimate was to play good enough so you could go to New York. You know?
What did musicians, most of the musicians that were top around your era, what did they think of Washington, D.C.? What did they think of playing in Washington clubs? What was their attitude towards Washington?
Well, when I started at the time I was talking about, for, I guess, a good 5 or 6 years, every band that I played in, I was always the youngest member. Because as I said, I started off playing, I was a teenager, and then I didn't realize at that particular time that was really meant anything, you know. But the guys that I worked with were guys who had been playing for a while. Some of them had traveled and come back home. And Washington was just a place for them to work in a